Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to get started on creating our second game in GameMaker, and in this case we're going to be working on building our own platformer. So let's go ahead and create a new project, and we're of course going to be doing this in GameMaker language. I need to give it a name. I'll just call this Mr. Grand Adventure. So give it a moment. There it goes. It's loaded up. And now we need to figure out how we're going to create all of the things that make our game. So of course, I'm going to want to create two sprites at this moment, since our goal for this video is just to show basic movement. So I'm going to go ahead and create a sprite in our sprites folder. I'm going to call this O player. Go ahead and edit the sprite. Nothing too fancy. I'll make it green. Fill this in. All right. My player is now a green box. Beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and create another sprite. And this is going to be my O walls. And my walls are just going to be these white boxes. We'll leave that be. Of course, some of you may have already created your sprites and gotten that all worked out. That's fantastic. Right now, I'm just going to have these two sprites for the moment because the focus is the movement. I've got my sprites out of the way. Let me go ahead and create our first object. Our focus first will be the easier of the two, a wall. Oh, my mistake. These are sprites. These sprites will have S player and rename this as S wall. Our object will be O wall, and I'll just grab my wall here. There we go. We have that linked up, and then we will create the object for our player, O player. And grab our green sprite. There we go. Now that we've gotten that set up, we of course need to do our create event for a couple of basic parameters for our player. Let's go ahead and maximize this a bit, increase the size. And now inside here, we're going to want to provide all of the relevant details so that way we're able to quickly modify the basic details on our character. So initializing variables. So we have horizontal speed. How fast are we moving in the horizontal direction? By default, we shouldn't be moving at all. Vertical speed, vertical speed. This is also going to be set to 0. This is gravity. Wait, that gravity is a built-in variable. We're going to do a custom setup, and so gravity speed. And this is going to be 0.3. I know that's nonsensical. Gravity is a force and it causes acceleration. Sure, I'll rename this to acceleration, gravity acceleration. Okay, now that my conscience is clear, we want to set two other variables. What is the speed of our sprite while walking? Not sprite, player. So walk speed. This is going to be 4 pixels. Sounds good. And then our jump speed. How fast in pixels will we be moving the moment we jump? I'm going to just say -7. You can play around with this number, figure out what pleases you, but we have some nice, clearly labeled variables. Gravity one, we might move that a little bit up to the top. But the other ones, that is set. We can modify these as we see fit. These are essentially the starting variables, starting speed, The rest of these are more so set stuff. Now that we have this set up for the moment, now the next part, this will not be something that we address necessarily all the time or constantly, but this is a setup for something that we will revisit later on whenever we start having different player states. Right now, we are just going to be dealing with the player moving around, but the sooner we get started on setting up player states, essentially having the player act within a state machine, the player is only capable of doing certain things within certain states. If the player is in the movement state, then the player can freely move. If the player is in the attack state, the player has to do whatever the attack action is, complete that, and then is allowed to move. That is how I'm going to be covering those components for our player. So rather than us having to update our code as we go through it, we're going to plan ahead, save ourselves some time, and work on getting some of these values set up early. So we're going to create a constant, specifically a numerator, and this is going to be player state. Since this is meant to be a constant, constants are typically written with all caps. Our player state is, and then we have a couple of states. Right now, we just have the movement state, or move state. And that's it. We'll add to this in the future. But for the moment, our starting state is going to be player state dot move. That's the only option right now. So now we've got some basic details. We know the speed due to gravity. We know our walking speed, our jump speed. We've set our starting values. How fast am I currently moving? I'm not moving at all. And what is our current state? We are in the movement state, so our player is allowed to move. Some things we'll add in later is the attack state, death state, whatnot. There might be a state that we put for a cinematic. We don't want the player to move. We want it to follow set operations. That's what the state is used for. Right now, our only state that we care about is our movement state. We've got all our creation done. Let's go ahead and start working on our step event. And so in here, we'll be addressing all our relevant actions. Action / movement logic. So first thing, player input. We want to, of course, respond to player input. Rather than us having to manually type it out everywhere down the line, we could save it to a variable and check these variables. So I'm going to have my key for left is just going to be equal to a keyboard check. And did the player check the left arrow key? If they did, then we're going to move left. I know some of y'all don't want to use the arrow keys. Let me shift this over and shrink this side. Some of y'all don't want to use the arrow keys. That's fine. You could also put an or statement. So that way there's two options and keyboard. Let's maximize the size. Keyboard check and the letter A. If we press A, then we can move to the left. All right, and you might not be surprised, but we're going to do the same thing with our other option and check for the next key, right. Let's see if these things are glowing. What's written wrong? Board needs an open parentheses here. Okay, there we go. Key right, and we're going to check if we press the right arrow key, and then if we press the letter D. Now that's set up. we'll be good to go. For left and right movement, we know, do we press left? Do we press right? But what about for our jump? So key underscore jump, I'm gonna just rename these things. And if I press the space, we jump. But I know some of y'all might want to pick another key. Maybe if I press W, I jump. Maybe you want to press the up arrow key to jump. Whatever you want to do, this is where you can mess around with these values. And I forgot this bracket. There you go. I'll also add in or and then keyboard check. Virtual key up. Okay. So in this case, I can press space bar, I can press the up key, I can press W. All of those will make me jump. This is how I want my game to work. You can change your game however you'd like. I'm just putting all these options in by default. So we got our player input set up. But now, what are we going to do? Well, we want to keep everything as simple as possible and sort things out where it is appropriate. Because this is going to be a much larger game than our last project, we're going to start working more towards our future operations. If we don't, then we're going to end up having to redo our work constantly as we move along. So that's why we're using the state machine. So we're going to use a switch, and based off of our state, do a different action. Now, of course, we have one case at the moment. If our player state is equal to move, then we just move. But I don't want to write all this code in here because we're going to end up having a lot of code to write for all of our cases. This is going to flood our step event. A lot of this code is going to be able to be reused in different components. I don't want to copy and paste my code over and over again. I don't want to type out my code and change a handful of things over and over again. We are going to introduce a new concept here, the script. So let's pull over this section on the side, and we're going to create a new script that we're going to use and call in here. So we're going to create a script. This essentially serves as a function for us, and right now we have the option to name our script. I'm going to call this player state move. Hit enter. It automatically updates this. You need to make sure these match, at least for this moment. We don't need these details. Okay. Technically, they don't need a match. You can just call them individually. But for our purposes, we're going to keep it organized and simple. Player state move matches up. We're good to go. This is our first function. What do we do in our move case? Now that varies based off of all the details that we want. But in order for us to move, we of course want to play around with all of the checking and everything. See if we're allowed to go through the process of moving around. Are we colliding into the walls? Are we moving around an obstacle, object? We'll explore that all in detail in the future, but at this moment, all we care about is, can we move left? Can we move right? And can we jump? So I'm going to create a temporary variable called move. This determines move direction. Move is equal to key underscore right minus our key underscore left. What is key right? What is key left? Actually, it doesn't know. But whenever we call our function, our script inside of our player, it uses all the player variables that have been declared. And so key right and key left are already known within our O player. Because if we check in here, key right, key left already established. So we've gotten that worked out. Then we go through and determine our ability to jump. Our jumping, we want to make sure that we can only jump if we're touching something. Otherwise, we can just constantly mash our jump key and then jump infinitely. That kind of ruins some of the fun of our game. And so in order for us to jump, I want to check if I am on the floor and the jump key has been pressed. But for us to get that working out, we're probably going to have to check a lot of the time if something is on the floor. So rather than having us redo this constantly, we're going to end up creating another script here. And this script is going to be standing on. So in our standing on script, we're just going to check if a specific object, we're going to pass in a variable. We're going to check, okay, are we standing on this object? In our case, we're just going to be checking for the wall. We're going to return out of this function the place, meeting, and based off our current x value and our current y value plus 1, that means 1 pixel below our current position if this object is there. And so if we pass in a wall, for example, a wall, it checks our current x value and y value. Since we're calling this right now in the player, it's going to check the player's x and y value, and specifically the y value plus 1 below it, then provide the correct object as needed. Now we're done with this script. Let me delete that top section. Now let's go back to our player state move, and we're going to make sure that we can freely move. So are we on the floor? Well, we're going to first check, are we standing on our O wall? If we're standing on our wall, then we're on the floor. We're good there. If we are on the floor and the key jump has been pressed, what do I want to do? Well, my vertical speed is going to be equal to jump speed. So this will get us to suddenly kick ourselves up and move a little bit faster. Just in the upward direction. So right now we've just programmed jumping. Our vertical speed is addressed, but not our horizontal speed. Our horizontal speed is going to be equal to move times our walking speed, walk speed. So vertical speed gets updated based off of the jump. Our horizontal speed gets updated with left and right movement. But what about gravity? We're supposed to have something that pulls us down constantly. If we don't have gravity, then our platform is not going to necessarily work, at least the way I envision it. Some mix between Mario and Metal Slug and everything else in between. But a lot of things are going to have gravity, so we might as well add in a gravity script to get that set up. Create script gravity. In this script, we're simply going to update our vertical speed is going to be plus equals gravity acceleration. Whatever the acceleration is due to gravity, our vertical speed is going to be modified by that. So pull us downward. And so back over into our main program that we're working on, our main script. I'm going to make sure gravity gets accounted for and slowly pulls us down before we do the jump. Because that way I can make sure that we at least get a full jump benefit. Otherwise, technically the first moment that we do the jump, we kind of get pulled down a bit. And so again, gravity gets modified by, or the vertical speed gets modified by gravity's acceleration. So now we have movement in the horizontal direction. We have gravity's tug on us, make sure we're always falling down. And we have our jump to have us jump up at a certain moment, so long as we're standing on a wall. And if we're on the floor and we press jump, we're good to go. But with just this, we're going to fall straight down and at this moment through any object, including the wall. We need to add in a small little bit about the collisions to make sure that we actually don't fall straight through. But as I've mentioned already, we're probably going to have a lot of things colliding into a lot of things. So we might as well create a script that handles that. So that way we can save ourselves some time in the future. This script is going to be movement collision check. So yes, long name, but it's got an important operation. So with movement collision check, we're going to be checking if we've, of course, collided into something. And we're going to be checking collisions in two directions. Horizontal collision and then vertical collision. For our horizontal collision check, I'm going to be checking if the place underscore meeting of our current x position plus our horizontal speed. How fast are we moving currently? Our current y position by itself. And in this case, our collisions or movement are entirely based on us running into a wall. That closes that, and that closes that. I technically don't need this. If we're going to collide into a wall, then we need to make sure we don't actually go into the wall, but we need to move as close as we can towards that wall. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to slowly move ourselves step by step towards the wall. So while we are not meeting, that's what the exclamation mark means. While we are not meeting the wall, we will, no, while we're not meeting the wall, x plus the sign. What direction are we currently moving for our horizontal speed? And our current y, and what are we running into? The wall. So long as we are not running into the wall at this moment, by moving 1 pixel to the correct direction, we're going to update our x value by 1 pixel based off of the direction we're moving. Horizontal speed. this will inch us step by step towards something. In this case, a wall, until we are as close to the wall as possible without colliding. Then once we've figured out all that math, X gets updated with our horizontal speed. Then we're good to go on that respect. Now our vertical collision. If now we can actually copy most of this stuff, we're going to just change a bit of it to reference vertical stuff, and rather than it being with our X value, this is going to be modifying our Y value plus vertical speed plus the sine of our vertical speed and plus the sine of our vertical speed. And finally, our Y value gets updated with our vertical speed. So now I have set up the operations relation to movement collision checks in our horizontal collisions and vertical collisions. If when we move, we would actually collide into the wall, then we slowly inch ourselves towards that wall step by step until we're next to the wall but not touching it. Then X updates as is according. Same thing for the vertical side. We move as close as we can up until we're not able to actually move, and then we stop. Then Y updates. Now that we have our collision check in place, let's go back to our player state move and place in our movement collision check. With this in place now, we just check to see if we can move, if we're allowed to move, we correctly move ourselves as is appropriate, and then get all of that worked out. Now, with that, we should have all the basic stuff we need. Let's quickly throw together something in a room. And in this room, oh, actually, we're not done yet. We need to go back to our player object. We wrote all this code, but we never actually told the player object to use the code yet. And so back in our player object, we make sure that the player does correctly grab and use all of this code. So if we're in the correct state, then we do player state underscore and move open close parentheses. This is a function we're calling. You need to make sure you call the function. If not, it won't work. And then break. That's just a way to properly close a case in a switch case statement or structure. Now that should be all the code. Let's go over to the room. Let's place a few walls. So I'm going to click on the wall. I'm going to hold down Alt, and I can freely like click and drag and make a small little arena. Wall it off. And I'm going to place the player right here. So this is our little arena. let's go ahead and see if everything's typed correctly. There's an entire possibility that I missed something small in here. All right, it looks like I did miss something because our wall is not actually catching the player. Let me double check what's missing. I missed one of the most important parts in here. Inside of our statements, we actually need to recall, we need to stop. I forgot to change my horizontal speed. So if we realize we're going to collide with something, we slowly inch next to it and then we tell it, hey, stop moving. Horizontal speed is set back to 0. And then we don't actually move. Now, if there is no collision, then we safely move no matter what. So that was just a minor mistake on my part. And that brings us back to a halt. So that way we're not constantly running into the wall or something. Same thing for falling. We need to make sure our vertical speed is set to 0 because we are running into the wall. We cannot move. So whenever we modify our Y value, we're not moving. So now whenever I run the program, it will correctly account for when there is a collision, we're not allowed to move. At least not in that respective direction. And so over here, we can see I can move left and right. I can press spacebar. I can press the up arrow key. I can press W. In all those cases, I am moving. If I try to move into the wall, it of course stops me. As you can see, I'm not falling through anything. And then I can actually fit myself inside of here, but jump straight out. Now we have a very, very simple platformer that lets us move around the screen, jump, and whatnot. Very simple, but this lays the foundation for us to have all our code nicely organized. Now, whenever we have anything that might have a collision, we have a script that already does that work, so long as we have variables such as horizontal and vertical speed created. Now this just checks for the walls. Maybe we modify this in the future to account for other things. We have gravity. If there's something that exists, we have gravity acting on it. Player state. For movement, if we have to modify anything related to movement, we just change this script to account for it. You see how small this script currently is? It would have been much more complicated if we had to write out all of these other components in here. Instead, they're nicely broken out, and it is easier to read and understand. We figure out what direction we move. We set the movement speed, have gravity act on us. We have the option to jump. We do any movement collision checks, and then we're good. And this also happens to actually do the movement. And that gets everything done. And whenever we check our player step event, we just grab the 3 keys that we're going to use right now and tell it, okay, we can move. And so we move. This is going to be extremely important, so that way our code stays small and simple. When y'all worked on the last project, the code in certain portions got very long and sometimes convoluted. There were portions that, depending on what you were doing, you'd have to copy and paste and slightly edit. With the introduction of scripts, we can save ourselves a lot of effort and keep our code as clean as possible, which is the end goal that we would like, so long as it does actually work and we've got a nice game to play. That's where I will wrap it up for this video. Thank you for everyone for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.